Welcome to this episode of HCTalk. As always, I'm your host, Lance Gormley. Our special guests on the program today are Jeremy Gulban, who is the CEO of Cherry Road Media. They have around 85 publications, which are all local papers. And as everyone knows, we have Chad Frey, the Kansan guy, who we affectionately have on the HCTalk program regularly, who is the editor of the Newton, Kansan. How are you doing today? We're going to start with Jeremy.
Good. Thanks for having me, Lance. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. And then, of course, Chad, I'm guessing you're your lively self as always.
Had the privilege of covering a donkey basketball game last night. So that's always a big highlight. For the first time in 30 years. It's been 30 years since I've seen one. That's what you get when you're in a market like Newton.
Yeah, I was going to say it's Newton famous donkey basketball to raise funds for local community and the prom, if I'm not mistaken. So I guess I was really interested. Chad and I have had a lot of conversations about local journalism, how that is complicated in many aspects by national media. There's a lot of distrust when it comes to national media, a lot of bias, and most of what we see, which people don't identify, is opinionated news media. So in many times this gets really confused with your local journalist or local publications. And when Chad and I were talking, he had mentioned that Jeff is a connoisseur of all things when it comes to local publications. And I think it's probably just been a few years now that Cherry Road Media has just embarked on acquiring local papers because, well, I'm going to let you answer that question, Jeff. Being the CEO of Cherry Road Media, and I'm assuming maybe over the last 2 or 3 years, why embark on the endeavor to acquire local papers and to pursue local journalism for smaller communities?
Sure. So this goes back to 2020, really, during the pandemic. Our background is as a technology provider, and we found that it was becoming harder and harder to get customers to talk with us about what we could do to help them, because their answer was, well, we're just getting it for free from Google, or we're just going to put our information on Facebook. And so I realized these big tech companies were becoming bigger, and bigger. And in my mind, I thought there was an opportunity. Well, first of all, that was concerning to me because I don't believe that a handful of companies should control all of the flow of information in the country, as well as the commerce in the country. So I had this idea that, local newspapers are very decentralized. There's pretty much one in every county in the whole country. What if we could get involved in that? We could bring some of our technical know-how in, bring some new ideas, some new technology, and then kind of form a network of local newspapers that could essentially compete with big tech. So that was the premise. I would say it's been an interesting ride. Obviously, as we've seen over the last couple of weeks, big tech is seemingly more powerful than ever, which, I didn't see that coming. And our challenges are much greater than ever, as we come into 2025. So I think there's something here in terms of this decentralized nature. And I think a lot of people agree with the concern about a handful of companies and individuals controlling everything. And I just saw local newspapers as really the only institution that was decentralized enough and had grassroots appeal across the country that could counteract that.
Yeah, I agree with you on the idea that we are really coming into an age where, like what you're saying, people can get on Google, they look something up that's just acquired. It's right there at your fingertips through a digital device. But Chad and I have also talked before that if it wasn't for you all, when it comes to covering local issues, having a local hometown paper, that even if you Googled something about your local community, if there wasn't that publication there to be able to have it come back and that information be published through a local paper, then there's just going to be a blank slate there. Would you agree with that, Chad? I know we've talked a little bit about that before, but.
And it's been a number of years since there was a really great study done by, I think it was in K-State, about what happens when there is no local media, right? And they had a case study of a community in California that lost their local newspaper, and then there was nothing there, nothing. And what was interesting is that there was a guy from the LA Times who decided, just on a whim and at a total randomness, to go check out what was going on in this little town that had no news. And what he found was that local taxes had gone completely out of control, and that the city bureaucrats, we're talking city commissioners, were now getting six-figure salaries when they were almost volunteers just years before. And it was just kind of nuts what had happened. The local government had just kind of steamrolled the populace of that community. Those are the kinds of things that can happen, just because if there's not local media and there's not a local paper, there's nobody watching what's going on, and there's no way to really find out about it.
You know,
That's a concern.
Well, and I'll pick back over to Jeff here. You had mentioned a little bit about news corporations, or these large entities are the ones that control the flow of information, let's say. So how important, in your opinion, is local journalism, such as we see through Cherry Road Media or the Kansan, as we know here locally, to understanding situations like what Chad's talking about, where if there's no local journalism, then there's no, I'm not going to say there's no freedom of the press, but there just is no press. Therefore, there's no freedom for the press to be able to report on these things. Is that kind of in line with what you were referencing as far as this information that's coming into our eyes and our ears and our minds that is not representative of a smaller demographic?
Yeah. So Chad is a trained professional journalist, right? So he operates with a code of ethics, with a methodology, with training of sourcing of information. And, he holds the government accountable, absolutely. But he also validates what the government says, which is another thing that I hear when I go to a lot of our communities, that, the government will say something and people don't believe them. And the fact that it appears in the newspaper gives it more credibility and more substance. And I think it's great that we're entering an era where more people are able to more freely express their opinion and share information, but there's still an element of professionalism that's needed, because how do you differentiate, the truth from the rumor mill? And I think that's where journalists and professional journalists come into play. And I'm not even saying you have to go to journalism school, but there needs to be some amount of training. I mean, we are subject to the libel laws of this country. We can be sued if we publish something that's false, and social media is not. So anybody can put anything they want out there, and there's really no recourse from that. And so all of that combined is why I think this is so important to have an institution that is responsible for making sure that information is accurate.
Yeah. Okay, Jeff, and just staying with you because we get to talk to Chad so much. I mean, I love it. And I'll include Chad in all this. And feel free to speak up, Chad, if there's something that goes from what Jeff is talking or Jeremy's talking about to what you would consider of local importance. But when we're talking about some of the challenges of this, your company, Cherry Road Media, owns around 85 publications. Once again, we said they were local papers. What's one of the main challenges that you all are seeing when it comes to people consuming their information via, like you had talked about, Facebook, the rumor mill, or whatever? You didn't say Facebook in particular, but that's the one that comes to my mind, which is anybody can throw anything out there on social media. It doesn't have to be right, doesn't have to be accurate. It could just be someone's opinion. But then when you all enter into a topic or a report on something that's going on, what's some of the challenges that you confront with that arena?
Well, our biggest challenge is getting people to pay for the quality information that we provide. because Facebook is free. Well, it's free in a cash perspective. You're giving up all your data, but it's free in terms of cash. So, and people have become accustomed to that throughout the last 25 years of the internet, that information should be easily attainable and free. And, I'm probably one of the worst offenders of that. I'll be searching around about something. I'll go to a website, I'll hit a paywall, and I'll move on. Not necessarily because I don't want to pay for it, but I don't want to go through the trouble of getting out my credit card, putting it in just to get the answer to this. And I think that's a huge problem. Now, here in 2025, I think we've got another problem that as a result of the last election, we're really seen as just not being relevant anymore. We saw a presidential election where the winning candidate went on the Joe Rogan's, podcast and spoke to 40 million voters. And now people are saying, well, younger people don't read the newspaper, so why would I advertise with you? So all of these challenges and these changes are leading to problems for us of generating revenue, which is what we need to continue to do our job and to pay people a good wage and to produce a paper and do all the things that it takes to actually run this business.
Chad, go ahead, Chad.
Lance, I mean, you guys have heard me say it on HCTalk before. My kids have to eat.
Yeah.
Right? We don't do this for free. And the newspaper industry made massive mistakes in 1993, 94, 95, and 96 when they were migrating themselves over to the World Wide Web. They were giving it all away for free. So we're now here in 2025. We helped condition everyone to think that all of this should be free. But at the time we didn't know that was going to be such a fighting. We're fighting decisions that we made, decades ago. And, at the end of the day, we are paid professionals. And I've heard people in other arenas, school teachers are a great example, that they'll say, I've been doing this for 30 years. They're not paying me for my 30 years of experience. They don't understand the expertise that I've built up for 30 years. Well, you know what? I'm in that boat now too. And we had a columnist recently ask the question, can journalism survive if nobody's willing to pay for it? And I think we all know the answer. The question is, how do we get people to understand they need to pay for it?
Yeah, and when we're talking about challenges and paying for journalism, Jeff, you had mentioned the now president Donald Trump going on the Joe Rogan podcast, and more or less, I'm going to say, talking highly negatively about trust in media. Do you think that it's difficult for people to separate what we would consider national media that is horribly biased when it comes to one side or the other? I call them talking heads. My words, not your guys's. But separating that style of media from your local journalists?
Yes, it shouldn't be the same thing because we don't cover any national stories really. We've eliminated Associated Press, so we don't even have the means to cover national stories. But we're still getting lumped into the same, big liberal media, filter that the New York Times is and the Washington Post is. Give you a great example. I got an email from a reader, subscriber in one of our papers in Texas, saying, why did you cover Martin Luther King Day and not cover the inauguration? And when I went and looked at the paper, we covered a local ceremony around Martin Luther King Day, had our reporter in the room taking pictures and covering it. And we don't have any way to cover the inauguration anymore. So I wrote back and I said, look, and it was, of course, framed in, you're biased against President Trump. Why are you covering, this kind of thing? And I wrote back and I said, no, we cover local stories. This was a local story. We don't have the means to cover national stories, nor do I think we should, because there's plenty of other places to get that. And quite honestly, whatever side of the political spectrum you're on, it seems like most people just want to hear that anyway when it comes to national. news, so fine, go get it wherever you want to get it. We're here to talk about things in Harvey County. That's what's important. That's the value that we add.
And Chad, do you think do you get similar calls when it comes to the Kansan? I've never heard anybody say the Kansan is not a credible source, right? I've never heard anybody say that the Kansan is really leaning one way or the other. I'm sure you might have had some experiences where that might be the case. Maybe somebody doesn't like the way that you covered a story or something like that. But you know, when people are going to consume information and they have a local paper, are they really looking for national topics like that they can find other places, as Jeff's saying? Or Jeremy? I'm sorry, I called you Jeff.
Well, they shouldn't. Yep, they shouldn't be looking for national news from us. But to Jeremy's point, I got pretty much the exact same phone call. And to really drive that home, the coverage that we had, Lance, as you well know, is that week was the 65th anniversary of an address by Martin Luther King at Bethel College. And I'm being told I'm biased against Donald Trump because we did not report on the inauguration. I'm like, nobody's going to fly me to Washington, D.C. to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously. And I'm still getting emails from the Associated Press complaining about photos that Gannett Media used when we were owned by Gannett Media. So there's no way I'm going to go to them and say, oh, can I get a photo of the inauguration? I'm not going to do that. And that's not why you should be inviting me into your home 3 times a week. You need to be inviting me into your home 3 times a week so that you can read about what Martin Luther King said in this town 65 years ago.
And Jeremy,
so there you go.
Jeremy, I mean, ultimately, not to go full circle here and maybe duplicate a question or an answer that you've already provided, but is that really where the focus is for Cherry Road Media and the 85 publications plus maybe that what you're trying to achieve with having these local papers is cover local issues?
Yes, 100% local coverage. That's what we want.
Okay. When we talk about challenges, sorry, I thought maybe I was interrupted. But if we talk about challenges, I also like to look at the other aspect of it. And so where are the wins? You've chosen to move down this path. Cherry Road Media acquires multiple news organizations, or we'll call them newspapers. Where are the wins when it comes to this?
I think that the wins are, of the 85 or 90, whatever it is, markets, some of them are very successful, including the Kansan. It's a strong circulation, strong advertising base, but that's entirely because of Chad and Connie and everybody else we have there, working at the Kansan. We have other markets where we don't have people who are out and about and doing things like this to be known in the community, and we struggle. We lose money in probably 30% of our markets that we don't have people out there doing things like this. And I've struggled with, should we keep at it in those 30% of markets? Because I believe in this, and I believe that there is a way to sell local news and make money doing it because no one else is doing it, right? So in theory, you should be able to make money from it. But it's all about the people that are locally and the community. Newton embraces the Kansan and everything that Chad does. Other communities don't embrace their paper, and I think that really is what the difference maker is.
I have to say, and I've said it on the HCTalk program countless times, Chad knows this, I'm a big fan of the Kansan, always have been. I appreciate Chad coming on the program. We do everything we can to support our local paper with that. And a lot of the issues that we talk about are local issues and come from the Kansan, because otherwise there wouldn't be a story or a reporting on that. So when we talk about this I call it media bias. We're in a situation where I've almost, if I could, just turned off the national media altogether. I don't subscribe to the Washington Post or these large national papers that cover a lot of national issues because, well, there's not really a lot of relevance to me. There is in some ways, but it's not close to home. I don't know any of the people that they're talking about. Nobody's tangible. Nobody's covering, what's going on at the Newton City Commission or the Harvey County Commission or the school board. And these are topics that are relevant to me here locally. I mean, understand, I can turn on the TV and I can watch the Trump inauguration or go to a YouTube channel and watch it, but you can't really do that when it comes to local issues. So, I guess I want to frame it this way. Chad, do you believe that there is a turning away of people that want to sit and watch all and consume all this national media that is not anywhere or any way, shape, or form out their back door or their front door?
No, I don't. We're living in a community that for a while I've been calling a garage door community. People go to work and then they come home. When they get home, they open the garage door, they drive in the garage and they shut the garage door behind them, and then they're disengaged. And what they're doing is they're going into their house and they're turning on their TV. And for the most part, they're watching, if they're watching news, they're watching national network news. Quite honestly, I think it's the biggest struggle that many of our small properties have. People, unless the water bill goes up, people just don't care what's going on at the city council. They say they do, but at the end of the day, I'm the one that's been here for 30 years, picking up the phone and I don't see that, have this belief that when they're and they may be watching a quote local news, which here those studios are 40 minutes away, and yes, they can find Newton on a map and they parachute in and out every once in a while. So they watch that and they think they get what they need, but they're not.
Yeah, well, and I'll say too, national. Once we go back to the differences, if we're looking at them one over the other, which is better, which is more relevant to me day to day. You mentioned these organizations such as, our local news stations that do come in and they parachute in and then they take out. But most of the time when we're watching that or we're seeing that information, it's very insightful. You're getting a very brief amount of information, and it's almost as though it's these topics in which just generate, the whole point of is to generate views, likes, and engagements, right? And that's not necessarily what Jeremy's goal when it comes to local journalism is about. Is that correct?
Sure. Yeah, we want to be more in depth, more substance to what we're covering, and you're absolutely right. TV news is really entirely different. I think it is about quick views. And, online social media, things are even more in that direction, right? Just about clicks and flash and sizzle rather than substance. And I think, when you write a written story, your ability to deliver information is much greater than you could ever do in a quick, 30-second, 1 minute, piece.
Yeah. Okay. So I would look at it as a challenge, but this goes back to Jeremy again. When we're talking about this to consume information, or how, one of the challenges you had mentioned earlier was that people paying for subscriptions or investing in their local paper, and then this digital age in which people are getting online and they're Googling something and getting some information. Is there a way or a path forward in which what I would call traditional journalism can be married to what we would consider this new wave or new age of consumption of information? Is there a way to bridge that gap?
I hope so. We're certainly trying to do that. And, part of the problem is where we're coming from. If you think about 25 years ago, newspapers literally had a monopoly on information, right? There was no other way to get advertising out or to get word out. And they would throw a paper in every driveway pretty much in the county. And the industry, in my opinion, got kind of fat and bloated and happy and, wasn't able to really adapt to that. So we've kind of looked at this coming in really kind of at the bottom here and saying, we need a model that we can survive by getting 15 to 20% of the households in a county to pay to subscribe. And then that means we can't be all things to all people. We have to find things that people are interested in. And I like to believe that there's that number of people who care about the community, who would spend really not that much money annually, right, to be informed, to be part of that group that's aware of what's going on, is contributing to what's going on. And we've got to figure out how to reach them, how to get them to subscribe. And, we've said we're going to focus on spending our money on people like Chad, people who are reporting the news. And we're going to figure out how to be incredibly efficient with every other aspect of what we're doing. I think a lot of organizations cut their journalist costs, and I think that's a mistake because that's who's producing your product. So we've gone the opposite way. We've invested in journalists, and we're really focusing on being as efficient as we can in every other aspect.
Yeah, Chad, while you're moving around, I love that. Probably trying to get better Wi-Fi. Well, go ahead.
I want to throw this in here. I've been at this a long time. I've been at this longer than Jeremy has even thought of being at this. And this is where I want to heap some praise on Jeremy, because the actions of Cherry Road Media have been drastically different than the previous companies that have owned the Newton campus. And those companies never wanted to hear how they were being their own worst enemy. And he just described it, because their first answer was always get rid of the newsrooms. That was always the answer. And, there's enough of us around still that lived through that. It was horrid. There's a reason that the Newton Kansan right now has one full-time news reporter, one sports reporter, and that's it. You go back even just 10 years, and we had about 3 times the number of people around to do that stuff in 10 years' time. The answers that Cherry Road Media has been giving to these very hard questions are very, very different. And their commitment is very different. And their commitment is to make sure that there's still people around to do this work that needs to be done. And anytime there is any suggestion of maybe needing to pull back on people, it is gut wrenching for every person in this company, Jeremy included. And I think that it's important that's something that I think is really important for the community of Harvey County and Newton to understand. Obviously, I'm not happy of being in the situation of going from being a part of a staff to being the staff. But my boss isn't happy that I'm in that spot either. And that's important for people to understand that.
Well,
because we have a different kind of company here trying to do this.
And I got to say, I got to hit it home. We hear a lot about local journalism. And from what I catch from what Jeremy's saying is when it comes to your publications, Cherry Road Media, your focus is local journalism. And even though you're a company that doesn't reside here, your headquarters are not in Newton, Kansas, America, that doesn't change the fact that this is a local paper, that it employs local people, and that this is a benefit to our community to have you all here. Would you agree with that?
I would. I mean, I don't know what's in your paper most days. Chad is responsible for that, and he's in control of that. So it is your local paper.
Yeah. Coming back to Chad again, just real quick, Chad, or I guess maybe Jeremy could answer this. And I just want to know because, I don't want to get into the inner workings of business with you or for you to divulge any information that maybe you don't want to or whatever the case may be. But are we here locally at least, or in some of these other publications that you're talking about, you said 30% don't really do that well, 60%, to 70% do. Are we a community that appreciates our local paper in which we see maintained or increased subscribers?
You are in one of the most unique situations, I would say, anywhere in the country for a community of your size, because you actually have two papers that both are seemingly very successful. And there's a lot of communities that don't have any papers anymore, let alone one. And to have two that the community embrace is very, very, very unusual in this day and age.
So as far as our demographics,
and
go ahead, Chad.
And both publications in this town, both of us, are suffering from the same national trends, right? And when you start talking about subscriptions, the national trend is a loss year over year over year. The uniqueness of Cherry Road, and us as well, is that when you start talking about those losses by percentage, we're doing about the best job of anybody of keeping people. We just are. And then the national percentages, help me out here, Jeremy. I think the national percentage is like 10 to 12% a year.
If not more.
And that's not where we're at. Yeah. And we're nowhere even close to that. Now, we've got some individual publications that are probably at that or above. But as a company, we are doing the absolute best of anybody.
And okay, so coming back to Jeremy, I mean, I'm going to ask a broad question here. If we know that this is happening and we're trying to move in a direction that maintains people wanting to consume local journalism, wanting to consume local issues, but there's times in which that doesn't happen, just very broad. How do we save local journalism? How do we turn the corner on this and not just continue down this slow progressive decline? What can we do? What can people that are listening do to be able to ensure that local journalism survives?
The great thing about this problem, if there is one, is the answer to that is entirely within the control of the people of Harvey County. Subscribe and get your friends and neighbors to subscribe, and we will have a thriving newspaper going forward. It's a very, very simple solution, and I just wish we could get people to see it and to act on it.
Yeah. Lance, you're fond of saying, how much is an online subscription?
Yeah. Online subscription is like $5 a month. You get 12 papers. You can't beat it. It's $20 for,
there you go. There's the answer. That's our answer.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, that is our answer.
Well, one trip to McDonald's, a month, yeah. You can get 12 papers.
And the difficulty I have is that, and this is, I mean, been saying this for almost 30 years, that we're trying to transition to where we're much more reliant on our online subscriptions. But still, what's paying the bills is advertising in the print product. That it's just a reality of the business. That's the way it is. So we definitely do need to have some people to jump on in print as well. I used to say print will always be here. I don't know that that's really the case. And personally, and I'm not speaking for anybody but myself. Personally, I really think that the Canadian tariff that we're going to see here in days is going to hurt every newspaper in this country hard, because you're talking about our expense line, that one expense line going up a minimum of 25% overnight, and it's going to hurt. So do we need to transition away from a print product? Yes. And I've been saying that for 20 years too. But we have to come to the realization, and our communities have to come to the realization of how the bills are really paid.
Well, if you don't support local journalism, you're not going to have a local paper. That's the end of it.
Exactly. Right, and subscriptions, and I remember the very first time I made this statement, it was 1999. Subscriptions are ultimately a way for us to lose money. What they're really about is making sure that we know beyond a shadow of a doubt we've got your eyeballs, because then we can go sell advertising. And for a long time, you could write a check to the Newton Kansan for $125 and get it a year of the newspaper. It did not pay the expense of printing the newspaper that came to your door.
And so then you have that same issue where the people that you employ, Jeremy, and the cost of what it takes to produce a paper is continuously going up. And the last thing you want to do is turn around and raise the subscription on what people pay, because that just creates another challenge.
Yeah, but Chad's point is a good one on this newsprint tariff, which I heard this morning they pretty much said is going to kick in on the 1st here. And then there was some talk about an aluminum tariff, which affects the plates that we use for printing. So as these costs keep going up, we're going to need people's help on this, and we're going to need to use less paper. And we don't want to reduce the number of editions we're doing, but we might need less pages. And we might say, you've got to, if you want to see more pictures, they're online. Go over here and look at them. And I'll just say that the printing plant that we acquired in Hutchinson about a year and a half ago, it runs extremely efficiently. Like, we are doing everything we possibly can to keep costs down in the way that we're producing the papers, probably more than anybody else in this industry is doing. But I can't deal, a 25% increase in our biggest ingredient, if you will, is a big problem, right? So we're going to need everyone's help to figure out how to navigate through this.
Yeah. Okay. So, man, I could talk with you a long time, Jeremy, about the subject that we're talking about, and Chad and I talk about it a lot. With what I do, it's all digital, right? But I'll tell you, if it was not, and I'll just say this to the audience, if it was not for the Newton Kansan and Cherry Road Media, half of what we cover would not be in existence. It just wouldn't be in existence. So I wanted to make that statement. Chad knows this as anybody that watches the program. One thing I like to do before we, end the program is and then we could talk forever, but just as far as where we're at right now, I give people the last word to speak directly to the hearts and the minds of everybody listening. Jeremy, if you got the floor to speak directly to the hearts and the minds of anybody listening right now, what do you have to say?
I would just, first of all, I want to thank Chad and everybody there at the Kansan for the great job that they do, working so hard and not getting paid what they should, which I'll freely admit. But I'd love to pay them more. And we are dedicated to making this work, not just there in Newton, but across Kansas and all of our properties, and with the printing we're doing in Hutchinson for other papers. But we need your help. We cannot do this alone. If you own a business, we need you to advertise. And if you live in town, we need you to subscribe, and we need your friends and neighbors to subscribe. And if everybody steps up and does that, we can have a newspaper forever. But if you don't, then, eventually it's going to fade away. And so you really control your own destiny here as a community.
Chad, you got a final word?
Here's my final word. You guys just got a window into why I was so excited when Cherry Road Media bought the Newton, Kansas. My first allegiance has always been to the community of Newton. It's a place that I fell in love with very quickly when I came here to go to college in 1989. And when I had the purchase, it didn't take me long to understand that these are people I wanted to work for. And I'll be honest, at the time I was out my last ropes. Within the 6 months going into the purchase, I had applied for 450 jobs. I wanted out. I haven't applied for that many in the last couple of years. So I'm ecstatic. And I think that even if something were to happen that takes me away from this place, I think that the Kansan is in absolutely great hands. And the motivations that led him and Cherry Road to Newton, Kansas are the right ones. So there's my last word.
Okay. Well, I got something I'd like to say, and I say it a lot on the program. I know Chad very well as the editor of the Kansan. We know him affectionately as Chad Frey, the Kansan guy. I couldn't do what I do without Chad. I'm very fortunate that Chad, really it was Chad that set this up between Jeremy, myself, and him. Apologize in advance for any technical difficulties that we've had with internet working or not working the way that it does at times. But I just really like to say once again, Jeremy, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your heart and your mind with us. And I'd say this goes down as one of the best interviews I've done, honestly, with somebody. I wish I could have you in the studio. So if you ever come to Newton, Kansas, America, we could have this conversation again in the studio, right? So we won't be Zooming it. But anywho, just like to wrap it up by telling everybody I really appreciate you listening to this episode of HCTalk. Our guests were obviously Chad Frey, the Kansan guy, who you all know real well, and then also Jeremy Gulban, who is the CEO of Cherry Road Media. They do have 85 plus publications across the United States, and those are all local papers. So I guess when it's all said and done, folks, if you want local journalism to survive, you need to subscribe. And it costs a little over $5 for 12 papers online over a month. And I think probably when this is all said and done, I'll just go ahead and up my subscription, which is an online subscription, back to a paper subscription, because when you're talking $20, that's one trip to your drive-through at your local restaurant, if you want to call it a restaurant, fast food place, and you can support local journalism. So I appreciate you both for coming on.
Thank you, Lance.
Right. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Lance.
Yep. Thanks for listening again. We'll catch you next time, folks.